Let's get it. What's going on, everybody? Good evening. I hope you guys are having a phenomenal Wednesday, or might even be a Thursday, depending on when you guys are tuning in. But I hope you guys are having a great day wherever you guys are right now. It's once again going to be a little bit of a shorter show since there will not be any guests on tonight's show. It's just going to be some boxing news as well as what we're going to kick off the show with, which will be a fight preview. We are roughly, what are we looking at? About 5 hours away from Liam Paro versus David Papot. We're going to be discussing and breaking down that fight card as well as getting into some boxing news. Now, as always, if you guys have any comments, questions, topics for me to discuss on tonight's show, you name it, or just want to go back and forth, whatever it is, leave your comments in the chat and I will address them because those comments will pop up on the show and we will then address them as we go throughout the duration of tonight's show. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. In Australia, we're going to be having a fight card. Now, I'm only going to be breaking down two of the fights in this card because they're the only two that really mean something, I should say. First of which is a co-main event. Liam Wilson will be making his return to the ring against Jorge Santana, a super featherweight fight. Remember, Liam Wilson fought a few months ago, then had a solid performance, bounced back. There's that. Now he's going to return against Jorge Santana. Obviously, for Liam Wilson, he just continued to build himself back up. Try to get himself back in a position to possibly fight for something that matters. So he's going to be in this position. I don't see any way in which he does not win this fight. He should win this fight. And so I do expect Liam Wilson to walk away victorious from his fight against Jorge Santana. Let's go to the main event. This one's a little bit more intriguing. And there's a few reasons why. It is going to be Liam Paro versus David Papot. Now, the weight class is welterweight. All right, let me fill you guys in on something. Liam Paro was champion at 140, had a beautiful performance against Subriel Matias last year. After that performance against Subriel Matias, he then transitions and ends up losing his belt then to Richardson Hitchens earlier this year. All right. He then made a decision to go fight again at 140. He was victorious a couple months ago. Now he's moving up into welterweight. And it's good. I think it makes a lot of sense. 140 is not a booming weight class in terms of big names. 147 is not a very talented weight class. However, there are lots of big names. If you go down the route of a Roy Romero, you go down the name of Manny Pacquiao, a Ryan Garcia, you get the point. Lots of big names are at 147. And I think that's what Liam Paro sees and why he's going to go after that and now pursue a 147-pound world championship. And on top of that, there is an easier path to become world champion as well, as Lewis Crocker just won this past weekend. That's now available from the fight. I think that's where he's going to angle himself into. So let's break this down, though. Liam Paro makes his debut at 147 against David Papot, who is a solid boxer. He's had a solid career. He's a good opponent. He was very, very close to not making weight. I will admit to that point. However, he made weight finally at the very end, and he's going to be fighting Liam Paro. So my prediction on this fight, Liam Paro should go out there and win this fight. I don't think it's going to cause too much problems for himself. I think he should go out there, have a good performance, be able to get the win at 147 in what is essentially on paper a tune-up fight in preparation for what he hopes to be a world championship shot against Lewis Crocker. He's already made that call out happen. He wants to make that fight. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's obviously where Liam Paro is angling himself in that direction. He wants that world championship shot. So we'll see what happens there, but I do see Liam Paro coming out victorious. I just think he's the better fighter. This fight is pretty much handpicked for him to go out there and get a victory. So if Liam Paro or Liam Wilson, if either one of the Liams lose, I would be quite surprised when I break down their fights on tomorrow's show. I think both guys will walk out victorious, and that should be all that has been written. Let's go into some boxing news, though, now. Shakur Stevenson is going back and forth. And there's two things I'm actually going to address in regards to Shakur Stevenson on today's show. The first one being this. Shakur Stevenson versus Teofimo Lopez is on the verge of being set in New York City as a PBC-based card backed by Turki Al-Sheikh. Can I read that last sentence? A PBC-based card backed by Turki Al-Sheikh. Did you catch it? A PBC-based card backed by Turki Al-Sheikh. Here's what's interesting. For so long, a lot of PBC fan bases out there, and y'all know who I'm talking about, guys that seem to love PBC a ton. I'm someone that likes all the promotion companies. I really don't like one more than the other. But there's some people that obviously think PBC is all that and will therefore hate on Turki Al-Sheikh for one reason or another. But here's the deal. PBC seems to be working alongside Turki Al-Sheikh in forming a mega fight at 140 next year in New York City between Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez. That's huge. Absolutely huge for the sport of boxing on multiple fronts. First of all, Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez. I've said this many times before, and I will say this all up to the fight. I think Shakur Stevenson wins this fight, but I feel like this fight is massive for true boxing fans. Guess what? I can already see it coming. Are we going to see a lot of pillow fight? A lot of guys saying running? Are we going to see all this type of bull crap by a lot of people that are just casual boxing fans? Without a shadow of a doubt. What I do expect to see happen, though, is a fight that true boxing fans will love. Two guys in which I truly do believe are top 15 pound-for-pound fighters, maybe even top 12 if we're going to be a little bit more specific. I will be showing you guys my tiers quite soon. Those two guys are stepping foot in the ring. For Shakur, making that jump up to 140 is very impressive. I've given him his flowers for wanting that fight to begin with. And then for Teofimo Lopez, this is a chance to cool down one of the hottest names in boxing right now. So it's a win-win for both guys. I love this fight. But then the question becomes this. If all goes as I've laid out and I plan for Shakur Stevenson in terms of him going out there beating Teofimo Lopez, what could be next? We all know the Tank Davis fight just is not going to happen. We know he's not going to fight Keyshawn Davis. So there's really limited options. Does he go back down to 135, fight like Lamont Roach? Certainly possible. Until he and Ryan Garcia started going back and forth on X. And they were going back and forth multiple times. And all I will say is this. I never thought of, and you guys know this because I've never said it, I never considered a Shakur Stevenson Ryan Garcia fight before. It never crossed my mind. Never was something that I thought of, at least recently. And then they started going back and forth. And in the back of my mind, I started wondering, could we see a Shakur Stevenson-Ryan Garcia fight? You know, Ryan Garcia's up at 147 now. He has this big name. Obviously, whenever he fights, he will sell. Shakur Stevenson's a hot name, and if he goes out there and defeats Teofimo Lopez, you know, you could really sell that fight. I do not know if Garcia could come down to 140. It might have to be a catchweight at, call it 144, 143. But could that happen? Maybe. And if it does, it'd be a very intriguing fight. Now, I think Shakur Stevenson would pick him apart and would easily win that fight, but it would sell quite well. It would be an intriguing fight, and it would really boost Shakur Stevenson's name. If you're talking about going on a run of beating William Zepeda, defending your belt there, then going on out and beating Teofimo Lopez and possibly Ryan Garcia, that would do wonders for his name in his career. So that's just something to kind of put in the back of your mind. Obviously, it wouldn't happen for quite some time, but that is something that obviously was brought to the attention of us, and I am intrigued by it. A bout between David Benavidez and Dmitry Bivol will be discussed by Bivol's manager, WBA president Gilberto Mendoza, tells ESPN's Bernardo Pilate. All right. I've got a few points here. Let me start off with this. As a boxing fan, would I be thoroughly intrigued to see David Benavidez and Dmitry Bivol fight each other? No doubt about it. But what I wonder is what is going on with Artur Beterbiev in this situation? We know Beterbiev wanted the Troji fight. He was begging it. He wants the fight. And Bivol's been out all this time. And now we come to find out that it appears that Bivol might be intrigued and possibly going out there and fighting Benavidez. So I believe that a Troji must happen with Beterbiev. I want that fight to still happen. I love the first two fights. I think the Troji must happen. And if anything happens before then without some form of agreement with Beterbiev, then I just don't see how this possibly happens. But let's just push everything out of the way. Let's hypothetically say that everything's been handled appropriately with Beterbiev. All these things happen. Just from a boxing fan perspective, would I love to see Bivol versus Benavidez? Absolutely. I think when we talk about this fight, it would be very intriguing. Great styles. Obviously, we're looking at two guys that I consider top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in all the world. I would be absolutely thrilled to see this fight. And honestly, any combination of a Beterbiev, Benavidez, or Bivol combination, I would love to watch it. And so that's what's really exciting about light heavyweight. You have three guys, all of which are in most people, if not everybody's top 10 pound-per-pound list, all in the same weight class. If you can mix and match these guys, make it happen. I personally would see a better route of it being, I wish we could have had on November 22nd, but seeing Benavidez, Beterbiev fight each other, and then the winner goes out there and fights Bivol. If that's a route, go ahead and make it. But any combination of those three guys from a boxing fan perspective, I would love to see. If they can go out there and book it, make it happen. But I just am intrigued. The only aspect of this I just wonder about is if Benavidez and Bivol fight each other, what is going on with Beterbiev? Because Beterbiev does deserve his Troji fight. I've been very vocal about that. I still would be inclined to want to see that Troji happen. And so if that all has to get situated and settled out, we'll see what happens there. But yes, it is according to reports that David Benavidez and Dmitry Bivol will be discussed with Bivol's manager as a possible fight. So who knows what happens there? I'm sure we'll have more details in the future, but that's now on deck. I want to go into an interesting segment now. We've been discussing Canelo, Bud Crawford, Inoue, all week long. And probably for most of this week, I will still be talking about them because of how masterful those performances were and the impact they had on boxing. But I have a proposition to ask you guys. What is next for these guys? There's three different people, one group that I really want to emphasize on what is next for them. I'm going to start with what's next for Terence Bud Crawford. Because for Terence Bud Crawford, he has everything open to himself right now. This man is debatably the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. This man now has a massive name and image behind him. He can go get whatever he wants. And so I wonder, what would Terence Bud Crawford want? He hasn't necessarily given us answers. He's given us little sneak peeks and previews of what he could go after. But there's so many options on the table. So I just want to sit back right now. And I actually want to ask you guys, first of all, in the chat, let me know, what do you guys want to see Terence Bud Crawford do? Do you want to see him retire? Do you want to see him possibly move to 175 and hypothetically fight one of those guys? Do you want to see possibly Benavidez move down to 168 and fight him? Do you want to see him defend his belt against a fellow guy at 168? How about move down to 160 and fight? What do you guys want to see him go do? I want to know you guys' thoughts in the comments. But as for myself, let me outline these plans. First and foremost, there were rumors of him possibly fighting David Benavidez. Now, I don't know if this was a drop down to 168 for Benavidez's part and go fight Bud Crawford for all the belts, or if this is a catchweight, or if it's Bud Crawford going up to 175 to fight Benavidez for his belt. But Turki Al-Sheikh hinted at it, and already BOMAC confirmed that this is not a fight that they want to make, at least right now. And that makes sense. Obviously, for starters, Benavidez already has a fight booked for November 22nd. He has to get past that. He's in lines we just talked about, possibly Bivol, Benavidez. Makes plenty of sense. But that's probably off the table. Would be an inclining option. Then you look at the rest of the guys at 168. And let's just be honest. 168 is not a hopping division. There's a lot of guys that have the opportunity and potential to grow massive names. Obviously, Lester Martinez, people fell in love with him and Billy this past weekend. You have guys like Charlo and Caleb Plant. You know, the list is still there at 168. But from where Bud's at right now, after the payday he just got with Canelo, none of those guys make a lot of sense, and Bud Crawford would easily beat anybody else at 168. So let's rule out that in my eyes. So that means this, and this is what I honestly think we're going to see Terence Bud Crawford do. Why not move down to 160? I don't think he can ever go back down to 154. He already said he won't. How about 160? And if you are Terence Bud Crawford, you have a couple options. Do you go after just one belt and then walk away? That's honestly where I'm more so thinking he's going to go down this path. But what do you do at 160? You already become champion at 135, 140, 147, 154, 168. You skipped 160 though. You could possibly have a 6 weight class jump that you completed the belts in all those different weight classes. Something that very few boxers could ever say they've ever done. And if you are at 160, there's nobody in that weight class that I think is better than Canelo Alvarez. Sure, you like Janabek, you like Carlos Adames, or Laura. That's fine. I don't think that Bud Crawford will lose to anybody. Now, I understand this is a boxing game, anything can happen, but that would be interesting in my eyes. If I were to pick the dream ending for Bud Crawford, he is up there in age. He is 37 years old. He will not be fighting until next year. So what does Bud Crawford do? Here's my guess. I think he does a homecoming fight in Nebraska in 2026, similar to what Usyk I think will be doing or trying to do in Ukraine in 2026, as one last farewell fight. What do I think Bud Crawford will be doing? I think he's going to go pick Laura. When I look at the 3 world champions, Laura is the one that I feel like fits him the best where he could get a W and pull off of becoming world champion at 160. And if that's what he does, I think that's the perfect farewell tour for himself. Now, you could go out there and throw out these ideas. Could he go out there and do a tune-up fight at 160 first and then fight a guy like Laura? Option is certainly there. I would not be surprised by that. I just see him doing one last big fight, become world champion, complete the legacy in terms of 135 to 168 jump, and at that point in time, you will have solidified yourself once again, furthermore even, as one of the greatest fighters of this entire generation. He could very well go out there and try striving for the 50-0 mark. He obviously is nearing it. You could go out there, do a tune-up fight at 160, fight Laura, try to unify the belts, become undisputed at 160, and then do 1 or 2 just other fights to get to 50-0 like Floyd Mayweather. He could do that. I just don't think that's Bud Crawford. He's currently averaging 1 fight a year over the past duration of the past few years now. I just feel like Terence Bud Crawford is at a point where how much bigger can you get than Canelo? Even if you go undisputed at 160, it's not better than Canelo. Might I add in one other option just to throw it out there? When I mentioned the tune-up fight, it's not really a tune-up fight, but how about this idea? And I don't know if this could possibly happen, but just going to throw it out there for you guys. How about he goes out there and fights Chris Eubank Jr.? Just throwing it out there. I'm not even saying it's going to be at 160. We know Chris Eubank Jr. struggles to make 160. You could do it at 168. You could do it at 165 catchweight. I don't know what they would do, but you could do Chris Eubank Jr. at Wembley Stadium. That fight right there would probably be the only last big money draw for Bud Crawford. Bud would beat Chris Eubank Jr., obviously, But if Chris Eubank Jr. goes out there and performs the way he did against Conor Benn once again, and he puts on a masterclass and earns the fans even more so in the UK, I could very well see them make that fight happen. The money would be there. He could grow his brand even more for Bud Crawford. I could definitely see that fight possibly happening. So just throw it out there. Lots of options, as I said, though. For Bud Crawford, this man has all the chips on the table. He has so many options. I'm excited to see what happens. I do think he at least has one more fight in him, but I do not see him having more than 3 fights. Somewhere between 1 and 3 is what makes sense to me. We'll see what happens, but that could be next for Bud Crawford. How about for Canelo Alvarez, though? This one's where it gets really intriguing. They already did announce that he still has 2 more fights left on his Riyadh season card or contract. He will be fighting those 2 fights. They already confirmed that. Both he and Turki Al-Sheikh confirmed it. So we can't expect Canelo not to be retiring. He will fight 2 more times, likely in 2026. What could those fights be, though? And just a side note real quickly, can you imagine what 2026 could possibly bring? If what I just said is accurate about Bud Crawford, he retires in 2026. If Usyk ends up retiring in 2026, and Canelo Alvarez retires in 2026, we could be losing 3 of the greatest faces of this generation of boxing in the same year. And that is a scary sign for boxing. That means it's time for a lot of guys to step up. And honestly, let's just throw one more name out there, because God knows what's going to happen with this man, but Gervonta Tank Davis. For all we know, this man, it's crazy to think this man could possibly retire after the Jake Paul fight. He is not throwing that out the window. He obviously is not focused on boxing. He could be out the window as well. Just throwing that out there. The point is this. We could be on the verge of an entire new generation of boxing starting next year. Just keep it in the back of your mind. And that's why I always want to make sure I say this before fights. Don't take these guys for granted. When we get to watch guys like Canelo Alvarez, Bud Crawford, Usyk, do not take these guys for granted. We only see greatness ever so often in boxing. We don't know how much more longer they have in the sport. And in a sport, which some do consider dying to some extent, where we just don't see so many guys pursuing boxing, we don't see the same kind of a culture and mentality. For those guys that do have the mentality of fighting the best, those guys that truly do take the sport and handle it the right way, don't take these guys for granted. We don't know how much longer they have. But let's get back into Canelo. What could possibly be next for this man? And I think there's many options. Let's throw out the most obvious one. Canelo Alvarez has now lost to Terence Bud Crawford. He doesn't have the belts anyways. Where does he go from here? Ultimately, it's going to come down to what does Turki Al-Sheikh want. Turkey's paying him big money. We know that he brought in excess of $150 million for the Bud Crawford fight. If Turki Al-Sheikh brings out the bag once again, I could see them fighting the Benavidez fight. That's the obvious one. Has the hype died down a little bit now that he's lost to Bud Crawford? Sure. Because it wouldn't be for undisputed at 168. So does Canelo possibly move up to 175 to incentivize him to possibly become world champion at 175 once again by fighting Benavidez? That could happen. Not out the window. That's the biggest one I will say. Obviously, I'm somebody that has this firm opinion. Canelo has done enough for the sport that he does not have to fight Benavidez. That's my firm stance on this. I've said this over and over again. I'm not switching up on it. He does not have to fight Benavidez. Do I want him to? Yes. Would I be hyped if I'll get out. Would I be hyped if this fight got made? Without a shadow of a doubt. But am I upset if he does not make it happen? No. I'm not going to go call him a complete duck or all these things at this point of his time for not making that fight happen. So let's throw Benavidez. That could be there. Option number 2, once again, this is a Turki Al-Sheikh deal, Hamza Shiraz. Now, it wouldn't be for the belts, most likely. The only way it would happen, it would not be for the belts. There's no way of making it happen right now. Because Canelo likely fight February or March. So throw it out the window, I was going to say. It would not be for the belts, but Canelo could fight Hamza Shiraz. Here's the 2 points why I see this fight possibly being made. One of which is this. If you're new to boxing, get ready to learn something new. Turki Al-Sheikh really likes Hamza Shiraz. There's obvious reason why he likes him. It is what it is. He really, really likes Hamza Shiraz. And so if you're Turki Al-Sheikh and you're making these fights happen, I could definitely see Turki Al-Sheikh pushing Canelo in the direction of fighting Shiraz. The other point I want to make is, remember this. I forget when Canelo made this statement, but I know he said it at least on one occasion that he wants to fight in the UK. Who is from the UK? That would be Hamza Shiraz. You could go out there and fight at Tottenham Hotspur or at Wembley, possibly Wembley, between those two guys. Just going to throw that out there. That is an option that we do have on the table with Turki Al-Sheikh's funding. Don't be surprised to see that happen. Another UK guy you could throw in there, Chris Eubank Jr. Obviously, Chris Eubank Jr., we know 160 is going to kill him. He can hardly make the weight class. He's going up to 168 post-Conor Benn era. If Chris Eubank Jr. does that, that could definitely sell out Tottenham Hotspur, but also probably Wembley. So if that is a situation that obviously Turki Sheik wants to make happen, and Canelo still has that dream of wanting to fight in the UK. I could see him doing that fight in about February, March, April time. Here's one other one. It is the rematch with Bud Crawford. Personally, I just don't see that fight getting made. I just don't, I enjoyed the fight. I really, really did enjoy the fight with Bud Crawford and Canelo Alvarez. I thought it was a fun fight. Obviously, I think it got better as the fight progressed, but it was a good fight. But I just don't feel like there's a point in making it happen again. If you're Bud Crawford, you've already beaten Canelo. You would have the confidence going in there. Crawford would be the obviously Canelo would be the underdog in this case, and if they did the rematch. And for Canelo, I'm sure he wants to get back, but there's other fights to make now. I feel like we saw it. It happened. It's done. I just don't feel like it will be as big if they did the rematch. Now, I could be wrong there. Like I said, I'm not against it, but I just don't see that happening, but it certainly is on the table. However, I will add this. There was no rematch clause involved for this fight on Terence Bud Crawford's part. So it's not mandated for Terence Bud Crawford to do the rematch, but it is on the table. So there are options for Canelo Alvarez. I just don't see him fighting any of the guys at 168. That's just really it. So those are options on the table. I personally, if I had to make a bet, I would say he does fight in the UK against Hamza Shiraz. That's my personal bet. Obviously, it's way too early, but if my way too early prediction for Canelo Alvarez's next fight would be for him to go out there and fight Hamza Shiraz in the UK at either Wembley or Tottenham Hotspur, just pencil that in right now. Those are the fights I do see him possibly making come February, March, April, which is when Turki Sheik said he could return to the ring. All right, Naoya Inoue. What is next for him? Well, here's the cool thing about this part. We already know. Inoue moves different than any other boxer. Prior to MJ, it came out, he's fighting December 27th against David Alan Pascasio in Riyadh season. And then after that fight, the co-main event, Junto Nakatani, kind of obviously you have to hope he wins that fight. They will then do a face-off in the ring, and we'll start to hype up for what will be the biggest fight in 2026, featuring Naoya Inoue and Junto Nakatani, which will be an incredible fight. The best fight you can probably make in boxing at that point in time. It will be phenomenal. So that's kind of penciled in then. So after that, though, is what I really want to emphasize, because now we're looking, summertime 2026. What is next for Inoue at that point in time? Here's the option I see. I think he does beat Junto. Now, Junto is the only guy that is realistic right now that I think could possibly beat Inoue. Only guy. And I do think it's going to be competitive. I do think Inoue has the edge in that fight, but it will be competitive. But let's say he beats Pascasio, which he will. Let's say he goes out there and beats Junto Nakatani. Then what? My guess is two options, one of which is the Bam Rodriguez thing. I honestly just, as much as it would be interesting to see it happen, I just don't see it happening. The most realistic one I've said over and over again is Bam versus Junto. That's the fight I feel like we should be more so pushing because it's much more realistic in terms of weight class and age. If you're Inoue, that fight could happen if Bam wants to move all the way up to 122 and fight him. But more realistically, I see Inoue going up to 126 and fighting a guy like Nick Ball or one of the other champions. Now, if we look at 126, I'd have to look at two things. By a skill set standpoint, he waxes everybody in 126. Nobody in that weight class could compete with Naoya Inoue. Just my personal opinion, but I don't see anybody competing at 126 with him. However, we've already seen Inoue get dropped before. How is he able to resist the punching power of a guy like Nick Ball and the other guys at 126, obviously Espinoza, so on and so forth? How does he resist that? I personally think he will be okay, but that is something we'd have to figure out. And I can't answer that question until they're in the ring fighting. So that obviously would be another weight class jump. I think he would be fine at 126. But that's what I do expect. Summertime, we'll see him in 2026. Bearing he beats Junto Nakatani, we'll see him fighting there. All right, last group I want to talk about from this past weekend as to what's next for them is not a person, but rather a weight class. Now, it's not official yet. At this moment in time, we still have an undisputed champion at 168. That's Terence Bud Crawford. As I just talked about a little bit ago, I mentioned this. What is next for Bud Crawford? And obviously my guess was this. He's done fighting at 168. I think he will vacate the belts in the future, and he'll go down to 160. That's my personal guess at how he ends his career. That is why I wanted to emphasize what is next for 168. And here we go. 168. Now, I'm not going to say they're the biggest winners. Obviously, Bud Crawford stole the weekend, as in a way. Okay. But 168, you could make a case, is one of the biggest winners at large from this weekend. And why would you say that? Because none of them were ever going to beat Canelo Alvarez. Those belts were going to be held and pretty much held captive for the duration of the next 12 to 18 months until Canelo Alvarez retires. And if you're guys at 168, there's a bunch of young fighters. I'm somebody that watches all boxing I can possibly get my hands on that's on television to any extent. I will always watch these guys. And what I always witnessed, I was so outspoken about last week, was listen, you guys are going to love Christian and Billy. You guys are going to love Lester Martinez. Go out there and enjoy them. And I've also said other guys. Pacheco's another guy that a lot of guys do not know. Bektemir, he's another guy that people do not know yet. Iglesias, another guy that fought last week. These are guys that so many fans don't know yet because they don't have chances to fight for world champions when you have an undisputed man in Canelo who holds all the belts for a long time. Now, if Bud Crawford vacates those belts, that means we're going to have the opportunity to have 4 new world champions. And now we have an opportunity for guys like Christian and Billy, Lester Martinez, Pacheco, Shiraz, Munguia's now back in the picture with his PED stuff out the window. Yeah, we're just going to leave that there. Jamal Charlo, obviously the mix, Bektemir, Iglesias, Plant, Berlanga, all these guys now have a legitimate chance to become world champions again. And that's huge for them because 168 was being held hostage for so long. And it is what it is. Never complained about it because, listen, if you are greatness and you can accomplish undisputed and you are better, significantly better than everybody else, I'm not going to fault you for that. But at the same time, it did set the progression of a lot of these guys at 168. And we never were going to be able to see these guys reach their full potential until Canelo left. But now there's a possible realistic opportunity that within the next 6 months, Bud Crawford makes a decision to move down to 160, vacates all his belts at 168, and now we get to see all these guys have an opportunity to fight for world championship. And just to give you guys a sneak preview here, what came out today, and Billy Martinez rematch was ordered. Just the exact details here, following a request from Lester Martinez's team, the WBC has now ordered an immediate rematch between Christian and Billy and Martinez for the WBC interim super middleweight world title. Why is this significant, you might ask, and why did I just jump to that is because of this. That rematch will not happen most likely until spring, late spring, early summer of next year. Why? Because they just fought and they're going to have to take some time to recover, get back in the gym, all the different things. They might wait it out too because odds are quite high that Bud Crawford never fights at 168 again. If that is true, he vacates the belts, all of them open up, and Billy will then get promoted to world champion at the WBC, and Martinez and Billy becomes a world championship fight. That is something that I do see them possibly angling themselves into, and I would not be surprised to see them possibly try to make that fight happen right there. So, yes, one of the biggest winners of the weekend is the 168-pound division. I'm excited. So many young, good, talented guys that finally have an opportunity to go fight for world champions now, and I hope we can go out there and see that. All right, let's head into my updated pound-for-pound tier list. All right, if you are new to the show, here's what I like to do. I've never been a guy that really likes to rank people, and here's why. When I rank guys in terms of you're number 1, you're number 2, there's so much room for debate. In my eyes, the way I've always done this, whether that be for basketball content or boxing content, is I like tiers. And I get it. It's different. I don't really care. I like being different. We're going to go into tiers. I have a currently list of 7 top tiers of my pound-for-pound list. And in these tiers, now these are not ranked in order. Let me make this clear. My 1, 2, 3 tier, everyone you guys see in those names, they're not ranked in order. It's just the guys in those tiers. I'm going to put up on my screen very momentarily, and I'll break it down for you guys. But this is now, after a phenomenal weekend, the SchuZ's updated pound-for-pound tiers. Hopefully you guys have it up on your screen now. Let me break this down for you guys. The number 1 tier in boxing, Alexander Usyk, Terence Bud Crawford, Naoya Inoue. If you will come out here and say, well, why do you have Usyk number 1? It's not in order once again. This is just the top 3 guys. And when I'll look at guys in boxing, whether you think Inoue, Bud, or Usyk's 1, 2, and 3, you order them how you want to order them. I just don't see anybody else in boxing. I don't see how anybody else could possibly put anybody in front of these top 3. What these 3 guys have done for boxing is insane. The level of just expertise that these guys have brought to the level of sport. When we talk about this past generation, it's had a lot of flaws. The past decade of boxing has had so many flaws, it's incomprehensible. But what we've seen between these 3 men and Alexander Usyk, Terence Bud Crawford, Naoya Inoue has been 3 men that have gone above what the current generation wants to do in boxing. 3 guys that want to fight the best of the best, always willing to push themselves, high character guys that are just fun to watch. These guys have been the total package. Truly 3 guys that are throwback fires to what we've got to experience and witness in the 70s, 80s, 90s, those type of days. These guys have been exceptional for how they've elevated the game of boxing on their own behalf. And I just feel like personally, when we look at these 3 men, I just see all 3 of them, you got to put them in the first tier. If you want to rank one guy, however you want to rank them, go ahead. But when I see them, I see 3 guys. They are the best of the best. The next tier I'm going to discuss momentarily, they're not anywhere near what these guys are. There's a significant gap between these 3 and everybody else. I think all 3 of those guys in top tier, those are massive hats off. Let's go down now to top number 2. Dmitry Bivol, Bam Rodriguez, Beterbiev. Once again, not in order, just to put that out there. For Bivol, obviously, I would probably give him a slight edge if you want to call it 2A. That's fine. Obviously, beat Beterbiev, so that's fine. But Bam Rodriguez, what he's accomplished, phenomenal. And then for Beterbiev, likewise. So that's my second tier. Number 3 remains by himself. Or actually, yes, he remains by himself. It was actually last time I had Canelo and Junto together. Canelo has now been moved down to the 4th tier. But Junto Nakatani, all by himself, right there. What he's done is phenomenal. I'm excited to see him at 122 as he makes once again another weight class jump. 4th tier, Shakur Stevenson, Benavidez, and Canelo. Once again, not in order. Shakur Stevenson, what he's done this year has been sensational. All of last year, the talk was, okay, you're winning these fights, but you're running. He comes into this year, defeats Josh Padley by KO, and then has one of his career best performances against William Zepeda. He has already accomplished great resume things. I love him in that spot. Benavidez, same thing. He has accomplished great things. He's now world champion at 175. And then for Canelo Alvarez, still going to give him respect. He lost to Bud Crawford, had to move him down, but still, I think he's a top 10 type pound-for-pound fighter. Let's move down to the next tier, in which features Teofimo Lopez, Jerome Boots Ennis, Devin Haney, and Tank Davis. This gets interesting now. For Teo, I think that's self-explanatory. Obviously, he's there. He's done his job in the ring Times Square thing. Obviously, what he's done outside of the ring has been atrocious this year, but we'll leave him there. Boots Ennis, he did his job earlier this year fighting Montestantionis. Already has a great resume. I'm excited to see him move up to 154, see what he does. He could very well be a top 10 pound-for-pound type fighter, move up tier or 2 in the next calendar year. Devin Haney, once again, very accomplished fighter. Now, obviously, I'm not as high on him right now. He used to be higher up on this list. He's been moved lower and lower. Not great performances, but massive opportunity. If he goes out there and defeats Brian Norman Jr., he will easily be moved up into that 4th tier in my eyes. And then Tank Davis, hanging on by a thread. He really is just hanging on by a thread. His resume is very light. Him fighting Jake Paul is not good. He should have lost to Lamont Roach. He's not fighting the top guys. However, I appreciate his skill, what he brings. He does have some accomplishments, but he is hanging on by a thread in that 5th tier. Then Janibek, Opataya, Ortiz. Nobody's fought recently, but those guys remain in the same order. And then we have the final tier featuring Zurdo, Yabuki, Navarrete, Taraji. Taraji got moved down a little bit ago when he lost to Sandoval a little bit ago, Ricardo Sandoval. Obviously, he's just hanging on now by a little bit. He was a little bit higher on my list, but he lost his belts, no longer world champion. But that is, yes, my updated pound-for-pound tiers. This will probably not get updated for a little bit. I'm trying to think when these guys fight next. I know Boots fights, but I'm not going to move him up on that next upcoming one. So, yes, we will not probably have an updated pound-for-pound tier list until November 22nd, because that's when we're going to have, obviously, a lot of these guys find this cards, because you have Bam Rodriguez, Beterbiev will be on that card. You will also have Devin Haney, a lot of guys on that card. So that's what we're likely going to see when my next pound-for-pound tiers comes on the screen. So with that being said, though, let's get back into some other boxing news. Actually, before I say that, if you guys have any comments, make sure to leave it in the chat. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with anything I've said. I'll make sure to have those comments pop up on the screen, and we can go back and forth on that. Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, they had their press conference. Now, today was on my day, but if you guys are tuning in somewhere else, obviously it was yesterday for you guys. But Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, they had their first press conference for the rematch. All went smooth. No eggs were thrown. Nothing crazy went down. It was all business. Now, obviously, Chris Eubank Jr. uses elegant wording and made some interesting accusations, but nothing too crazy in this overall press conference. Here's the biggest thing, though. Now, I do know the news came out. It got leaked out just before the press conference, and then we saw it actually happen on the stage. But yes, Chris Eubank Jr. has changed his coaches again. Shocking, actually. Remember, in his first fight against Conor Benn, he had Jonathan Banks. He was the man in Eubank Jr.'s corner for the first fight. No longer is it him. He's actually going to go back with BOMAC. BOMAC has quite the week, obviously coming off of a massive victory for Terence Crawford. He makes his way out to the UK, and now BOMAC will be the man in the corner for Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. Very interesting addition there. If you are Chris Eubank Jr., I thought you fought a good first fight. Now you're obviously going to be moving on, bringing BOMAC back into the picture. Not sure why the changes are happening, but I will say this. Keep an eye on this. I do believe that in that first fight, Chris Eubank Jr. obviously was weight drained. We know that. He's going to be weight drained again. I don't know if him slugging out with Conor Benn went according to plan is what he wants. I don't think we're going to see as good of a fight as we saw in the first fight. Now, from an entertainment standpoint, when you bring in BOMAC, Obviously, I think he still will exchange, not just going to run the whole time. But I do see a potential where we're going to not see the brawl that we saw in the first fight. Not guaranteeing it, but with this changing by bringing BOMAC into the picture, I do see them possibly going for more so of a more technique-based fight, controlling the distance, and utilizing the weight advantage. Now, we'll see what happens, but it is very intriguing to see BOMAC now in the corner for Chris Eubank Jr. Other news, I just talked about him, Tank Davis. Jake Paul-Gervonta Tank Davis November 14th will no longer be taking place in Atlanta, Georgia. Now will be taking place in Miami, Florida. Interesting move right there. Not too shocking, but it is what it is. They'll be taking place in Florida. Everything's been changed now. The fight is still on. Deric Scooter Davis has signed a long-term promotional deal with Top Rank Boxing, the company announced. Massive. I was on the show, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Yes, 2 weeks ago when the Pro Box card happened, and I said this. There was rumors of this possibly getting done, and all I've been saying is this. If you do not know Scooter Davis, let me just emphasize this. He was on the show before, I think it was like 3 months ago now, but one of the most intriguing prospects in all boxing. Like, if you want to go watch high-level entertainment, great KOs, entertaining KOs, great fights, go watch him. One of the most exciting young prospects in all boxing. And I've been baffled that he has not been signed to this point in time. But Top Rank has now swooped in, signed him to a long-term promotional deal. Massive signing. Only thing I will add to that is this. Good job, Top Rank. You are signing guys. You might want to go work on that TV deal, though, because you're not going to be able to show any of these guys until you get a TV deal in place. Just throwing it out there. Couple more things. Actually, the final thing we already talked about in Billy Martinez, which will be a phenomenal rematch when that happens, is this. Naoya Inoue's latest title defense was the most viewed bout outside of Japan in his entire career. It eclipsed, listen to this, 13 million viewers in the US and UK alone. Top Rank made the bout free to watch on its Facebook account. I talked about this last week. They had some messed up issues with the whole Top Rank TV deal. It is what it is. They gave us the fight for free. Not upset with that at all. I've always been a big fan of that. But what I will once again say is this. Now, I don't know why it's going to be shocking when I say this, but guess what? When you allow the general audience to watch the best fighters and have access to those fights, guess what? People are going to watch. I know it's crazy to say this, and for some reason, promoters don't want to pick up on this. We all want to go down this whole pay-per-view era, but when we allow the audience, the casual fans, the people that are just trying to look for something to do on a weekend, whatever it might be, when you give people access to watch guys that are actually elite, they're going to watch. And you know what happens when they watch? And they watch a guy like Inoue fight, they watch a guy like Bud Crawford fight, they become fans. And guess what? That next fight, they're going to be back watching again. That's kind of how the world works. If you haven't watched basketball in the NBA, if you haven't watched football, if you haven't watched soccer, if you haven't watched any of these things, that might be shocking to you. But guess what? Every other sport in the world, they allow some of the best competition, the best players to be accessible by everybody. Not always, but a lot of the time, those performances by those athletes are accessible to just about everybody in the world. But boxing, they decide not to do that. We've all called it out. We've all called pay-per-view era done with or needs to be done with. And hopefully we're learning. We saw how much the Bud Crawford Canelo Alvarez card thrived. And now we get these numbers by Top Rank. That 13 million people in the US and UK alone tuned in to watch Naoya Inoue, and that was at the crack of dawn in Arizona at least. So guess what? How about we start moving forward and figuring out ways to not make fights be pay-per-view? Do what Netflix did. Go put commercials midway in between rounds. I don't care what you're going to do. Just let the fights be accessible, and guess what? It's going to grow the sport. So all that I can look at and say is this. Massive weekend for boxing. Everybody nailed what they needed to get done. They all executed well. And I think the health of the sport right now is in one of the best places it's been in a long time. Whether you like what I just said or not, the health of boxing is in a phenomenal place right now. And if we can continue this momentum, it will be huge for the health of boxing. Hopefully they do that, but only time will tell. With that being said, though, I appreciate you guys all for tuning in today's show. I will be back live tomorrow. Not sure on the time, but I will be back live tomorrow. No guests again on tomorrow's show. But may God bless you guys all. Have a phenomenal rest of you guys' day, and I'll see you guys back live tomorrow. May God bless you guys all. See you guys tomorrow. And with that being said, SchuZ out. God bless you guys.